Hi ladies, this is the solution to your 6.3 first your turn exercises. So this is example 1, your turn. So in this exercise, you're performing operations of functions and defining the domain of each of those operations. So if you haven't already done these, please try these on your own first by looking back at these last couple examples where we defined the domain of h of x based on the domain of f of x and g of x. So if you haven't already watched this previous video, please do that before you do these on your own. So pause the video while you work and you can unpause for the solution. The first thing you want to do is define the domain of f of x and g of x. So looking at these two functions where f of x is 5x times the square root of x in its simplest form, and g of x is negative 2x times the square root of x. Those two functions, since they have square roots of x, in order for them to be real functions, x value in either of them can be negative. Neither of them can be negative. So the domain of f of x can be any real number, any zero or positive real number, and the domain of g of x can be any zero or positive real number. So neither of them can have negative numbers as their x value. So in this first function, when we add f plus g, we get 3x times the square root of x. So the domain can be any non-negative real number. In the second example, f minus g is 5x times the square root of x minus negative 2x times the square root of x. So that's 7x times the square root of x. Therefore, the domain is any non-negative real number. And actually, to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to put it back how it was defined originally, where it has the rational exponents. So this is 5x to the 3 halves. And this is negative 2x to the 3 halves. And we're multiplying these together. And the reason I'm going to do this is so that I can add those exponents. So this is 5 times negative 2 times x to the 6 halves. Now, because the domain has to be, the domain of h of x has to be the domain of f of x and the domain of g of x, the domain here is all non-negative real numbers. And then in this last example, we have 5x to the 3 halves over negative 2x to the 3 halves. Now, as long as x is not 0, our function is negative 5 halves. And then secondly, we cannot have negative real numbers because you can't take the square root of a negative number. So as long as x is not 0 and x is not a negative real number, then the domain is all positive real numbers. And that's how we'll define the domain of that function h of x.